Good to have you. With Ghana set to hold its presidential and parliamentary elections on Monday, December 7th, 2020, all eyes are already on one of Africa's finest democracy. Ghana is often cited as a success story for a democratic transition. And on that premise, the two main political parties, the centre-right New Patriotic Party, NPP, the centre-left National Democratic Congress, NDC, have alternated stints in power since the country began holding multi-party elections, although each party has a basis of support in certain regions or ethnic groups. The parties define themselves by ideology and campaign on issues. The 2020 presidential election will be a rematch as the NPP has nominated Akufo-Addo for re-election and NDC has nominated John Mahama. This will be their third consecutive matchup, and the state is already set for what has been described as the clash of the titans.
Indeed, well, joining us to discuss the Ghana election are journalists Ebenezer, Afanyi, Dadzie and Sixtus Ulo. Good to have you join us, gentlemen. They're both Ghanaian journalists. Let's start with you now, Ebenezer. We see two old rivals squaring up for this election. Two men who have been president within the last 8 years. What can we expect?
Well, it's quite interesting. Elections are sometimes predictable, but also can be very unpredictable. Like you said, they are two old rivals, and this is the third time they are meeting each other. They met in 2012, they met in 2016, and they are meeting again in 2020. The historic thing about this one is that you have somebody who was president for one term and constitutionally wants to come back to finish the other term he has left. We expect a certain level of maturity, but of course, we also expect a certain level of respect from each other. Regardless of what the outcome may be, we expect that once the process is fair, each of them will be magnanimous enough to accept. But of course, there's also the legal way or the legal process where in 2012, then candidate Akufo-Addo went to court to contest the election results. They have both indicated, especially for the opposition, that if the process does not go fairly and they think that the process has been flawed, they will not accept any compromise results. And of course, that's indeed their right position to take. So we expect a certain level of level-headedness from both gentlemen and especially their followers. They have shown that somewhere just in the past 2 days, the two of them signed what we call the Peace Accord or the Peace Pact. And they were led into signing that peace accord by a civil society organization called the Institute of Democratic Governance, the National Peace Council, the Electoral Commission chairperson was there, and the Chief Justice was there to usher the two of them into signing a peace pact to say that they are going to be committed towards a peaceful election. And this is not the first time they are signing such a pact. And indeed, as some say that it is only ceremonial, but it does not mean anything. But well, some say, well, they will take them to their words because they signed and they spoke and promised that they are going to be committed to peace. But of course, not peace without fairness or justice. They both were very clear on that. So we expect that level-headedness from these two men.
Okay. Indeed, Ebenezer. Now, we also have Sixtus Ulo with us. Sixtus, as we said, this is the third time both candidates are meeting. So how will this impact voter preference and, of course, on the electorate?
It is probably one of the best pairs we have had in our fourth democratic dispensation. Best because we have a president who has served in office before, and so he has something to be judged by. Mm-hmm. And we also have a president who is still in office, and so also has a track record by which the electorate can judge him and assess his performance for the second term. And so, indeed, unlike many other elections within the fourth Republican Constitution, which we have always had only the benefit of assessing the track record of only one of the candidates, in this election, voters are able to compare the John Mahama administration in his first term, also compare that to the Nana-Addo administration within this period that we still are living in. And so the voters have clear concrete benchmarks by which they are able to assess each of the candidates. Again, it's simple or easier for the voters because they are able to judge each of these two candidates with particular landmarks that every Ghanaian voter is concerned with: education, corruption, infrastructural development. And so if you look at the campaigns that have been run from the very beginning up to this point, it's been heavily about education. What Nana Addo has been able to do with his concepts of free senior high school education for all Ghanaian children in public schools, we are able to compare that to the John Mahama concept of free education. He calls it, or the party calls it, progressive free education, by which concept they argue that we need to have some basics right as we roll out a fee-free education policy for our kids. Again, this is not what Nana Addo did. Nana Addo straight away went to look at the fees, which most often than not serve as a barrier to a lot of rural Ghanaians, stopping them from progressing in terms of education. Again, we have seen a huge leap on this particular development of education. We have seen both parties talking about financing tertiary education for Ghanaians under their tenures. So whereas the Nana Addo administration is campaigning on the backdrop that is going to give scholarships to the free SHS graduates to be able to study in the universities, the NDC and John Mahama are saying that for the first year in tertiary education, it's going to be free for all persons who enroll. And so, yes, voters also have the benefit of judging these two candidates by this. Again, another serious issue, which of course is not only peculiar to Ghana, is the question of corruption. In 2016, Nana Addo made corruption a big campaign message. And indeed, Nana Addo and the NPP succeeded in making John Mahama and the NDC look like the most corrupt entity and political personalities we can find in the entire Africa. In 2020, we see the NDC and John Mahama also pushing hard on this message of corruption, saying Nana Addo and his NPP have failed Ghanaians on their message of corruption. For the NDC, Nana Addo and the NPP are the most corrupt administration that Ghana has ever experienced. So we are seeing a playback of the message as we saw in 2016, just that this time around we have the tables turned around. Whereas the NDC is the one very loud on the question of corruption, we have the NPP seemingly being on the defensive on this particular subject matter.
All right, let's take you now on Ebenezer. Talking about comparison now, what Sixtus just did. The mainstay of every country is the economy, and no economy can grow where corruption exists. So in terms of the economy, looking at the economy now and the corruption perception index, which candidate did better?
Well, it's not a straight response to give. But particularly in terms of the economy, you would say that there have been a few indicators working quite better for this government as against the then opposition NDC when they were in power. And for instance, the cedi, the depreciation of the cedi, of course, has still existed. But this time around, the depreciation has been quite slow. And currently, for some time now, it's been quite stable. So on that front, there's that argument of this being able to stabilize the economy. And there's also an argument about interest rates and whether they have really dropped. But they may just have been just an insignificant or negligible drop in terms of interest rate. There's a bigger conversation about public debts and where our debt stands now. It doubled about 3 times what the NPP came to meet. And for the NDC, even though they claim that they feel that our debt has doubled or tripled, unfortunately, they think there are no tangibles to show for how the monies have been used. And so even on the corruption conversation, it's a bit tricky. And also especially because of what COVID has done to this for almost every country or every economy in the last part of the Akufo-Addo administration. We know what the COVID pandemic has done to economics in terms of their financials and whatever. So this particular election, the conversation or the campaign has largely not focused on the economy. It's not largely focused on the economy. But one particular thought they've talked about is the issue of the public sector debt. The fact that our debt has gone that high and we are close to that position of being, we are at debt at a risk of high debt distress. And that is what even the IMF describes our situation. So the debt is quite high. As to whether indeed the government has used those monies judiciously, that is another argument for another day. But the NDC is of the strong position that there is not much to show, especially in terms of infrastructure development for all these monies that we have accrued by way of public sector debt.
Indeed, Ebenezer. Now, Sixtus, I would like us to take a look at the electoral umpire here. How would you describe the Ghana Electoral Commission's preparation for these crucial elections? And are there unique challenges over time in conducting elections in Ghana?
We can say the Electoral Commission has been transparent. We can say that right from the mass voter registration, it is one of the things that the Electoral Commission itself pats its own back on. If you look at how they have consistently ensured that there's been timely release of information at every stage of the development, right from the mass voter registration, when we had to have a second round of registration for some category of citizens who could not take part in the first registration. Again, if you look at the question of even the credibility of the voters register, the question of who has been, whose name has been omitted from the voters register, whose name has been quarantined from the voters register, and a whole lot of developments right from June this year, when the Electoral Commission announced the mass voter registration. And so if you look at it in terms of how open the commission has been and how forthcoming the commission has been with information, there are a lot of other institutions that think that the Electoral Commission did so well on that. Now, there's, however, the question of the credibility of the voters register, which the biggest opposition, the NDC, has always taken the Electoral Commission on. Well, as to whether independently we can say that the Electoral Commission has been mischievous in the compilation of the voters register, it is one whole big discussion that we are yet to conclude on. But there's been accusations against government on how government has used the military to suppress voter registration in the NDC's stronghold, which is the Volta region of Ghana, added to the Oti region of Ghana. There's also been concerns of how people within border areas have been seen to be automatic members or sympathizers of the NDC, and so have been one way or the other intimidated and scared away from the voter registration. I mean, these are the issues that marked or marred the voter registration exercise. But these are conversations between the bigger opposition party and the government of the day, composed by the New Patriotic Party. And so as to whether the Electoral Commission itself can be seen as a free, fair referee in the process, again, it is another question that the NDC has never really frankly answered. The NDC believes that the Electoral Commission is holding their hands back whilst insisting that there's a fair level playing field. But these are allegations or concerns that the Electoral Commission Chief Jean Mensa has always dispelled. I mean, on several platforms, she's insisted that there is no way the Electoral Commission is going to be able to rig the elections in favor of the governing party. She's insisted that there is no way the Electoral Commission is going to sit by and watch the process be manipulated by the governing party. She's insisted that there's no way anybody who has registered, whose name is on the voters register, is going to be disenfranchised. And so from the position of the Electoral Commission, we have a commission that is clear in its mind that every registered voter, Ghanaian voter who is eligible, is going to participate in Monday's polls. But we still have an opposition that is somewhat skeptical about the sincerity of the referee in the process, and thinks that, well, they have to watch the referee keenly and closely to ensure that it doesn't skew the process in the favor of the governing party. And so, yes, for a lot of independent players like Kodio has also rated some of the works of the Electoral Commission to be, credible, to be free, and to be open, transparent enough for all to see, except for the question of missing names, people who registered but whose names got deleted somewhat from the voters register, which Kodio also had an issue with. But by the way, this concern has also been addressed, and we understand that there are some 830 registered voters whose names are not in the certified voters register, but which voters the Electoral Commission has insisted are going to be able to cast their votes tomorrow. Indeed, the NDC has spoken very forcefully on this particular matter and has always maintained that the Electoral Commission is going into this particular election with 2 different registers, which is not the norm. Well, but the Commission calls that second register, the NDC refers to as the missing names list. And so when you go to the polling station tomorrow to cast your vote, you are expected to be able to find your name in either one of these, either in the certified voters register or on the missing names list. Again, the Commission has put in place stringent measures to ensure that, for instance, the issue of multiple voting should be a thing of the past. Voters are going to be verifying biometrically. So there's a 3-tier verification process, and each voter should be able to find himself or fall under any of these 3 categories. The first one would be the biometric verification, by which a voter is expected to be able to authenticate the registration or his eligibility to vote through your thumbprint. Again, if you are not able to do that by some reason, there's the provision for a facial recognition at the polling station level. Okay. The machine is able to scan your face and authenticate that, yes, it is you who registered and you are cleared to vote. Where all these 2 provisions fail, there's the provision for a manual verification, particularly for persons whose names are on the missing names list. They would be able to vote through the manual verification process. So indeed, observing the Electoral Commission, they are clear in their minds that they are ready. Their systems are up to date. They are not going to disenfranchise anyone, and they are able to conduct a free, fair, and peaceful process. That's the position of the Electoral Commission.
Well, it seems the electoral umpire seems to have done a top-notch job there. Ebenezer, let me come to you now. Let's look at security. In spite of the fact that a peace pact was signed on Friday, can we expect a violence-free election? And the election has been described as one between a crocodile and an alligator. I wonder why that analogy.
I don't know where that analogy is coming from, but I think that's a bit of an overstretch or an overkill. But I think that one cannot say that elections will be peaceful 100%. I think it doesn't happen everywhere, not even in our father of democracy in the United States. We saw pockets of issues somewhere. So definitely, you may have pockets of issues. Now, your ability to quell those situations also is quite important. Now, the security have promised us constantly that they are going to be on top of their job, they are going to be professional, they are going to be apolitical, and they are going to avoid any biases on the day. Now, for the first time, we are having our security personnel who will be going on the field with their name tags, and they have even issued the specific uniforms that all the security personnel from the various agencies, the immigration, the Ghana Armed Forces, the police, the Customs Excise and Preventive Service, the Ghana National Fire Service, the uniforms they'll be wearing, and everybody will wear it with a name tag for proper identification. This is one of the first time we are having this kind of thing in our elections, and it's very, very important. And so we have also been told, we have normally what we call flashpoints. The Ghana Police Service has been able to declare certain areas in the country or constituencies as flashpoints. Now, flashpoint means that they have the tendency to be chaotic. And because of that, they are keeping a keen eye on all such flashpoints across the country. And so we expect that on the day, also one of the key things is that one of the challenges we've had that causes a lot of problems in terms of violence is what we have come to know as vigilante groups. Now, for the first time, we are going into this election having passed a law on Vigilantism and Related Offences Act, which means that we have made it more punitive for people who engage in vigilantism. And we expect by that law and all the promises coming from the security agencies and even the governing party that we don't expect the phenomenon of vigilantism in this year's election. And so we are expecting that whatever violence we are going to experience, they will be very minimal and very negligible. So I'm really very hopeful that this election will experience very minimal or minimum violence.
All right. Now, Sixtus, I hope you can take this question in about a minute. How would you describe the mood in Ghana among the electorate on this election, whether it's on social media or out there on the streets or wherever?
For the first time, as in many other African countries that conducted elections this year, it is difficult for voters to freely and openly campaign because of the COVID-19. Again, we haven't seen so much political activity as compared to other election years that we have witnessed in this country. Ordinarily, in other election years, you would see a lot of rallies across the country, day and night. Ordinarily, you would see very little action actually on the media space, the traditional media space in terms of arts. You had a lot of people going to the ground to the people, even if we were to start from President John Evans Atta Mills of blessed memory, how he ran his campaign. It was straight to the people, to the doorstep of the people. We can look at the campaign of John Mahama taking over, and as compared to Nana Addo in 2012 was one person who also went down to the ground. He toured every nook and cranny of this country, and the euphoria indescribable. This year we are not able to do that, and so we tend to see a lot of action on traditional media and on social media. So we have seen a lot of campaign ads on the traditional media. All the messages that we ordinarily would have seen on the campaign platform on the ground, we are seeing them on radio. We are also seeing a lot of press conferences this year, and I don't think we have seen the end of it yet, even though campaign is officially over. At this point, no political party is expected to campaign again by the rules of the game. And so this year, the defining factor has been the impact or influence of COVID-19 on the processes. But of course, people are excited about it. Excited not because they are able to ordinarily cast their votes, but excited because they have the opportunity to be able to assess a former president who is coming back against a sitting president in terms of track records. Excited because they are able to compare the two candidates in relation to the question of corruption, for instance, the question of the economy, for instance, who is a better manager of the economy, for instance, who is a better fighter of corruption, for instance, who is a better facilitator of education, for instance. So these are the excitement that we would be seeing. But as to whether this would have any impact on voter turnout, we are yet to measure, because a lot of the polls that we have seen so far, even the ones that are conducted by senior journalists on social media, you see a lot of people saying they will vote. You see little fractions of the respondents saying they are not going to vote at all. But everybody seems to be expectant, and everybody seems to have a choice already as to which way they are going to vote. And this we are waiting to see tomorrow. The Electoral Commission has also allayed the fears of voters in relation to COVID-19, that you can walk freely to the polling station, cast your vote, and go back home without the fear that you are going to take COVID-19 back to your home. So are voters expectant? I will say yes. Am I expecting a high voter turnout? I will say yes, because there's a lot of curiosity around the process this year. And who is going to win? I don't know.
Question, we must say. And so Ghanaians will choose tomorrow a government that builds infrastructure, or one that will strengthen the economy. Another historic day for Ghanaians tomorrow, 7th of December 2020. We've been speaking with Ebenezer Afanyi Dadzie and Sixtus Ulo, both journalists from Ghana. And as they say, may the best man win. Thank you for joining us on NEWSDAY.